Hello and welcome to this bite-sized video in which we're going to look at what it takes to secure a grade 5 on higher tier GCSE maths. So first, just to note on what grade 4 and 5 students have got to be absolutely 100% secure in. These are the areas, the types of questions where we see really high levels of attainment from our grade 5 and grade 4 students on higher tier. So these content areas have got to be something that is really secure. So now we're going to take a look at where we see improved student performance at grade 5. So what are those grade 5 students doing more successfully that their grade 4 counterparts aren't doing on the higher paper? And it kind of really comes down to these key areas of algebra and geometry, with a little side note there on compound units, which we'll see an example of on the next slide. For algebra skills, it's not necessarily the most complicated problem-solving questions. It might be an AO1 skill, such as rearranging formulae, but they're quite difficult skills to master and to do successfully. What grade 5 students are much better at is communicating mathematically and using appropriate algebraic notation to communicate. So they're much better at show that questions. They can do things like expand complicated expressions involving 3 brackets to show that it can be expressed in a given form. And they can use things like inequality notation and that formal function notation. In geometry, one of the key areas where we see a difference is in Pythagoras' theorem and trigonometry, and specifically when they are not told to use a particular method. So they have to figure out by looking at the information on the diagram whether they need to use Pythagoras' theorem, trigonometry, or maybe some other skills to solve the problem that's given to them. So just want to take a look firstly at the common questions that had the biggest performance differences between grade 4 and grade 5. So you can see on the left hand side here, really straightforward question. It was the first question on the 2022 paper 3. Straightforward Pythagoras question, but they're just not told to use Pythagoras. And this is where we see grade 5 students being much better placed to succeed than their grade 4. On the right hand side, we've got an example of the type of compound units question that we see a big performance difference in here involving density. And you'll recall there was a really similar question in the recent exams involving the density of salt, and we saw a similar performance difference between grade 4 and 5 on that. So just want to show this slide to exemplify what we mean when we talk about AO1 algebra questions and AO2 algebra questions. So on the left-hand side, we've got an AO1 skill. Part A is just evaluating a composite function. We can see here the performance difference between grade 5 and grade 4. Part B, obviously a lot more complicated, and we can see that was a clear differentiator for grade 9 students. On the right hand side, we've got our AO2 algebra questions. These are generally the show that. So the students are having to present something in a given form. The one underneath there, part B, a lot more complicated for our students, possibly because of the 2M and the 3M throwing a bit of added complication into the mix. So now let's look at some resources, and the key one for me is those crossover question papers. In the most recent exams, the grade boundary for grade 5 was 73 marks, and the total for the common questions on those higher papers was 76 marks. So it's really clear that a student needs to be getting most or all of those questions on these crossover practice papers to be confident that they are working around that grade 5 standard. So these questions are absolutely key. Students that are aiming for a secure grade 5 should be working on these questions all the time. And the great news is that there's a huge number of these. So there are 20 sets on the Emporium, and each set has got 3 papers of around 25 marks each. So a few ideas of how you could use these. If you start in December, you could do a set each week, and that'd be enough to take you up to the exams. So remind you, each set is 3 papers of 25 marks each. So you could do 2 papers in one lesson, in an hour lesson, and set one for homework every week. You could break them up into starters, so that each set's approximately 75 marks. So say you've got 4 lessons in a week, you're looking at 18, 20 mark starter, or you might do 4 shorter starters of around the 10 mark and then set 35 marks worth for homework. You could dedicate a lesson each week to doing some of these key questions, so modelling them, talking through them in great detail, and then follow that up with the shadow question from our shadow papers as a task for the next lesson or as a homework. So really consolidate that learning. So next up, it's our higher tier themed practice papers. So these are practice papers themed by topic. And on screen, you can see some of the key areas that we've identified where grade 5 students perform better than grade 4 students. So areas where it's really worthwhile focusing on developing their skills. Obviously, you've got also themed papers for those key areas of percentage and ratio that they just need to be absolutely secure in as well. Then we've got aiming for grade 5 practice papers. These are questions that grade 5 students have been successful on the series, so just be mindful. These will include obviously a lot of the crossover questions, so just be mindful of that if you're using also the crossover papers as well. Of course, to be successful at higher tier grade 5, students have got to be really confident with their calculator skills. So just a reminder that we've got a YouTube playlist to support that. This video is part of your subject advisor support from Pearson. I'm Vicky, I'm the subject advisor for Maths and Statistics, and you can get in touch with me in all of the different ways that you can see on screen.